Today I want to talk about something, and it has to do with mediocrity versus heroism. Now, you've noticed that in the thumbnail I have put two characters, which most of you probably know if you consume any sort of media whatsoever. You have the Deep on the left-hand side, the portrayal of mediocrity, and you have Aquaman on the right-hand side, the portrayal of heroism. And I think these two characters, if you put them next to each other, they genuinely have the most contrast in defining what's mediocre and what's heroic. And I couldn't find any other example to put this into perspective other than these two characters. You can come up with any other character, for example. You can talk about Homelander versus Superman and whatnot, but I think these two characters, they give a second dimension that I will talk about now. About mediocrity, there are two dimensions here. That's why we need the second one. The first one is the mediocrity and enshittification of the media that we consume. So that's a top level. That's something that we receive, whether from companies, corporations, media, producers, directors, and whatnot, and so on. That's something out of our control. That's something we receive. Either we accept it or reject it. And here comes the second dimension, in which these two characters become relevant. And it's the mediocrity and enshittification of the viewer's mind itself. Like the viewer, the consumer of these IPs, they themselves choose to enshittify their brains. Now, why am I saying that? Aquaman is a founding Justice League member, and I think he was introduced in 1960. He's a legacy character. His arc has actual weight. It's a three-dimensional character with deep storytelling. He's probably the best written character when it comes to the sea life. And he's a king, he's an outsider, his mom killed tragically, he had ups and downs with his brother, and so on. So it's a three-dimensional character with emotions and wins and losses, etc. The Deep, on the other hand, has only one register: pathetic. Now, he was written to be pathetic. That's by design. That's the storytelling. He was made to be pathetic by design. The writer, they knew what they were doing. They wanted you to actually hate the character and think of him as a pathetic version of Aquaman. So he is like that by design. He's mediocre by design. It's not a failed character because he was designed that way, to be mocked and ridiculed. He is, in a sense, a successful portrait of a failure, you know? Now, the turn here is that, and that's why I was talking about the second dimension of the viewers and the consumers themselves enshittifying their brains and accepting and actually loving mediocrity, is that if a character was written to disgust you and audiences, instead end up embracing him, the failure is not in the storytelling, the failure is in the public not reading the character well. The same thing has happened with other characters, for example. Even iconic characters like Patrick Bateman. These characters were written to be hated by the audiences. But instead, you have the viewers and the audiences embracing them, loving them, and setting them up as role models. But why do these viewers see a mediocre man with power and think that's aspirational? Like, what does that say about what they think power is, or what power is for? So that was the second dimension of the viewer themselves embracing mediocrity and thinking that it's a value and that it is aspirational when it is not. Now, the first dimension is the custodians of these IPs, or the people in charge of formulating these IPs for us, whether it be in books, shows, movies, film, etc. They themselves also have been developing a lot of mediocrity and enshittification lately. And James Gunn, the co-CEO of DC Studios, is a prime example. Now, back to the drawing the line between these two characters, the Deep and Aquaman. If you've ever watched Peacemaker Season 1, I don't advise people to watch it because it's a waste of time. But if you've ever watched Peacemaker, the very final scene, you will see Peacemaker himself cracking a joke about Aquaman doing something with fish. And it's just, that's disgusting. Like, why would you degrade a character like Aquaman that much? And we know that that's a characteristic of the deep. And I know someone might say, well, it's a joke, it's an internet joke, and people have been saying it since early 2000. Well, if it's a meme, keep it a meme. Like, why would you reinforce it on a character whose legacy has nothing to do with it? It's a characteristic that was written for a character that is mediocre, like the Deep, to literally tell people that this character is mediocre by design. But now they want to force mediocrity on legacy characters like Aquaman, and they've done that. And you'll see that James Gunn consistently does this throughout his work. I understand that in the realm of capitalism and business and whatnot, mediocrity is a business model. Why? Because it is cheaper, it is faster, it is testable, and it's safer to greenlight. Because even if the project flops, they can come back with, oh, well, it was just that, it just didn't work. They didn't spend so much money on it. And even if backlash occurs, well, it was whatever. It was a mediocre project that we wanted to test out there and see what people will say about it, whether they will appreciate it or not. Well, unlucky for us, people do appreciate mediocre stuff and they embrace mediocrity. The problem with excellence, if you want to create an excellent show or an excellent film or write an excellent book, is that excellence is unpredictable. And it can't be forecast to shareholders. Like, you can't tell them, well, we're going to make this Batman movie and it's going to gross over $1 billion US. You can't just do that. We've seen that with Matt Reeves' Batman. By all means, I don't think it's a glorious movie. I don't think it's a perfect movie. I think it's super flawed. I think it's ended its run at around 780 million US dollars, which is about what it deserves. But we also could have had Ben Affleck's The Batman from 2019 if it weren't for the executives at Warner Brothers. But that movie could have fed generations. Now, that's why excellence is unpredictable. And to reach excellence, you have to spend a lot of time and a lot of money, and you are not guaranteed high returns. So that's why you see mediocre projects getting greenlit all the time. You'll see a famous meme online stating that the Deep is the strongest superhero. Well, he's not a superhero, by the way, but they would say that he is the strongest superhero and whatnot. Of course, it's a joke and it's a meme, but the meme itself has replaced the character, because a meme by design, by nature, it is easier to circulate than an actual arc, like Aquaman's arc, because an arc requires effort from the producer or the writer and from the viewer and the audience. Because if the audience doesn't understand the depth of your arc, you will not make money. But the reason why these projects that embrace excellence are super unpredictable is exactly why they don't get greenlit. And we see mediocre projects get greenlit instead, which is genuinely insane. So it goes both ways. You have to criticize the custodians of these IPs for mediocrity and for producing mediocre projects, and you have to also criticize the audiences for their mediocre taste. So, back to the Deep and Aquaman. Aquaman did not get worse, but the problem is our capacity as an audience to read him got worse. So it's not the character's fault, it's the audience's fault. And the Deep as a character in of itself is not the disease. He is the diagnosis of a problem. And the audiences failed the test to understand that he was written to be ridiculed and not taken as a role model. In fact, the opposite. Imagine glorifying a sex offender and a one-dimensional hack, low IQ like the Deep, an unskilled individual, zero heroism whatsoever, and at the same time throw in jokes and belittling a character, a legacy character like Aquaman. Anyhow, take care.